All right. First of all, I want to welcome everybody joining the May Leadership Live. This month or this quarter, we are talking about creating the best you. And for the May section, we're talking about wellness, which is overall, this month is Mental Health Awareness Month. So again, I want to congratulate everyone who completed the employee engagement session for January, February, and March. If you guys need to revisit those, just email marketing and we'll send that out to you guys. But I'm going to now give it to Dr. Fuqua to introduce Dr. Laura and let him tell you a little bit about her.
Thank you, Antonio. Good morning, everybody. Welcome again to the May webinar session. So Dr. Lunsford is not a stranger to you. She's done a number of these sessions for us. And we are really grateful to have her here. She is the chair of the psychology department here at Campbell. She is a tenured full professor. She is well recognized for her writing and research, and she works with a number of companies doing a variety of different kinds of presentations and educational work. And she's a great teacher and presenter. So I'm going to, and she's like a black belt in something, which is very scary. So I'm going to stop talking and let her carry on.
Thank you, Dr. Fuqua. It is really great to be here. I enjoy doing these sessions. Folks always have terrific questions. And we're going to focus on wellness. And the really cool thing is I just started yesterday my summer class on the positive psychology or psychology of happiness, which focuses a lot on wellness. So I'm pretty excited to cover some of these topics with you today. And part of my message to you is going to be, let's think of small steps for routine. And there's going to be some audience participation, so prepare yourself. And it's Shotokan karate, Dr. Fuqua. I know you'll get that right by the time I come back. What we're going to focus on today is the best you, and that is definitely in the province of a lot of work in psychology. You know, what does it mean to flourish? And I mean, the last year in particular has certainly stretched a lot of our resources. So wellness could seem like a term that's far away, but it's not. It's actually, we have some work that suggests that people have had time to refocus, reconnect with families, think about what's really important to them. And so what we're going to talk about today is what wellness is. Now, when we talk about a definition, this is from the National Wellness Institute. It's living and doing well, plus the absence of distress. So you need to have all of those things for wellness to be occurring. And over on the right are some of the domains we talk about, these dimensions of wellness. And they should look familiar to some of you. Emotional, like how is your emotion? Are they out of control? Are you yelling at people, feeling upset? Occupational, your wellness at work. Are you excited to go to work, or you kind of dread that? Your physical wellness, is your body able to let you do the things that you want to be able to do? Spiritual wellness, and often that can be through organized religion, but it's this idea of a connection with a greater power, and all the things that go along with that. Intellectual wellness, we're doing a little bit of that right now. You're learning some things, so do you get excited about learning things? Is that something that enriches your life? And then social. The aspect of having friends and being able to connect with them is really important. And we're going to focus on some topics today. They're going to overlap several of these domains, but it helps us to kind of pause for a second and look at those and go, where am I on these 6 areas? Am I, really where I'd like to be, or are there some areas that I might want to improve? And we're going to talk about some specific ideas as we go through this presentation this morning. I always like to think a little bit about your organization's values. And here's your mission and values right here. So I just want to pause for a moment and kind of hear a couple of thoughts about when we talk about wellness, where does it line up with these organizational values? Can I have a couple of folks share some examples? Like, which one do you think is really where wellness is fitting? And you can chat or just unmute and share it out loud.
I'm going to say spirit of excellence. And I say that because the word spirit in there, and it basically your whole mind, body, and everything that your thoughts are produced kind of goes through your whole body and gives that output of what wellness could be or should be.
Thank you, Antonio. Yeah, when you look at the description, doing the best you can every day, that certainly would assume that you are also at your best, or else it's hard to deliver that, and having a purpose and treating others with respect. Sarah put in the chat also a spirit of excellence and doing the right thing, and grace through generosity. Now, when we think about doing the right thing, my question is, for who? For you? For the organization? For both? Okay, agreed with Antonio, making the best of every day. Grace through generosity provides wellness all around, and certainly grace through generosity has been really important this year in my life. I have extended a lot of grace, to students and faculty, frankly. It's been a little bit of an unsettling year, and really focusing on, I'm just going to give the benefit of the doubt. If you tell me you're not well or it's not working, I believe you. And so figuring out how to just to give that benefit does enhance our relationships, those social aspects. Perhaps we could make a case how they fit all of these. And wellness is something we often think about. Yeah, thank you, Dan. We before me's, or especially that social idea of wellness. We often think about other people, but we don't always think about ourselves. And wellness really does begin with some self-care and some focus on what do you need to do to be at your best or to feel at your best, so that then you can show up and be at your best at work and for your family and friends. All right, I have a poll here, so I've got them here, but I'm going to do it on the poll. We weren't confident about the poll, so I have launched the poll, and there's just 2 questions there. These are totally anonymous, so I just want you to respond about, you eat 5 servings of fruits or veggies a day, and you're happy with your weight, and you got from 1, not at all, to 5, extremely happy. And I certainly went and I weigh every day, and today I decided I needed to bike a little longer, so I'm not going to lie, I'm not always exactly where I want to be on that. All right, I'm going to give people, we've got about 40 of the 50 or 60 people, so just give people another 20 seconds to weigh in here. All right, it looks like we've kind of gotten at a pause. So here's where people are. I eat 5 servings of fruits, veggies a day. About 33% of you are in the middle with moderately. Some people are extremely happy. I would find who those people are, and you should start hanging out with them at lunch. Some people maybe have some work to do, the not at all and a little people. We're going to talk about some ideas about changing in terms of what you eat, and happy with your weight. No one's at the extremely, so we have to go find the very much people and hang out with them maybe a little bit. So there's maybe some work to be done here, and when we think about nutrition, there's a lot of information, and I think it can be a bit overwhelming. So I'm just going to give you some really simple ideas. There's a great website. It's a resource at the end of the slide, so we'll definitely make sure everybody has that, My Plate. And now, instead of talking about servings, the picture on the right is really the proportion of food that you should be eating at every meal. And so you can see vegetables and fruits should be half of whatever's on your plate. Grains about 1/4, and protein is a little bit less than 1/4, and then you can have some dairy. Now, what I notice that's missing, and when my mother comes to visit me, she scours my cabinets, because I practice what I preach. So there's no soft drinks in my house. If there were, I would drink them. So we don't have them. So she's always like, "Where's the Coke?" I'm like, "There's no Coke, Mom. We've been over this." It's not, sugar is not on this picture. And it's extremely surprising to my mother, and maybe to some of you. But dessert, I'm like, where's the dessert part? I grew up thinking a part of my stomach was reserved for dessert. I mean, 1 ate till you were full, and then you saved a little bit. But we know now that sugar is not great for us. And so just thinking a little bit about what's a tweak. Oh, yay, Andy, soda-free for 8 years. Good for you. My mother thinks water is poison. She'd be mortified that I was talking about her, but I'll tell her later today. So don't feel like you know something private. We've actually looked at her, and she's looking at the water. And So figuring out how to drink things that are healthy for you and distribute every meal, like this picture, can make just a big difference in your nutrition. Now, there's specific tips about like checking calories, and there's all kinds of suggestions for diets, but this is a pretty simple photograph that most of us can kind of try to think about when we look at our plate, is what's going on with how we're eating. So what I'd like you to think about is one routine, because food, it ends up here. I got a picture of gas. We all had a shortage of gas. I think it's slowly coming back. I actually biked to my dentist yesterday. I'm like, I'm just not clear. I don't want to wait in line for that gas station. But food is the gas for the brain. And there's some really important things that happen with food in terms of some neurotransmitters. And the big one here is serotonin. So it kind of helps to know that, food is, you really are what you eat. 95% of serotonin is produced in our gastrointestinal tract, and it's a really important neurotransmitter because it regulates our mood, it regulates our appetite, it actually helps us to feel less pain. And we know from research that if we just eat better like one day, we feel it right away. I mean, it's an immediate change. You can tell that you feel better. You maybe don't feel bloated or heavy, or you didn't have as much indigestion. So my message here is make it hard to eat poorly by either not having things in your cabinet at home that are things that you probably know aren't the best for you, that might be go-to foods for if you're stressed or tired, having a routine when traveling. And this website is really great that I've listed here. And in fact, I'm just going to stop this share for a second. They've got some really great resources I want to show you in terms of what to do when you're traveling. Hang on. So there are some things when you dine out. I'm going to stop this one. There are some things that you can do in terms of eating that makes a really big difference. So here's some of them. Learn to decode the menu. So baked, broiled, and grilled, they're good. Fried, probably not so much. Starting your meal with vegetables, for example, because that's going to be more filling than bread, which is also my personal favorite. Like, I will just eat the whole basket of bread and then wonder why I'm not hungry later. So learning to say, don't bring the bread, leave it there. Split your dish. Often in the United States especially, the servings are really big. So kind of in advance, just go, hey, could you just give me half of that and half to go later? And then looking for dishes that highlight some fruit and vegetables. Now, it can taste good, so I'm not at all advocating eating tofu. Now, for some of you, that might be your cup of tea. My husband, his head spins around if I mention the word. So you can have things that are healthy and tasty, but again, just sort of eliminating those big sources of sugar. And even things like orange juice. Like, I just want you to check the sugar content if you haven't started doing that, because that can actually have more sugar than a soda. So just sort of being a little bit more aware about what you're eating, and then when you're out and about at restaurants, there are some things you can do to kind of help you make some healthy choices nutritionally. So I want you just to write down for yourself for a moment, what's one thing that you could do in the next week? Doesn't have to be big, just small, whether it's bringing lunch to work, making a different choice if you're eating out, something at home. What's one thing? I just want you to record it for yourself that you could do differently related to nutrition. I'm going to ask some of you to share those at the end, so just jot that down for yourself. All right, if you're comfortable, if you'll, well, we'll share them in a minute, so just hold on to it. Let's talk about self-care. Now, I've got another poll for you. This is a topic I'm particularly interested in. So I've got 3 questions here. So I know how to re-energize. Again, 1 is not at all to 5 extremely. I have a routine for self-care, and I sleep at least 7 hours a night. I always feel like it's a race, like horses are racing as people are responding, and it's changing. All right, we've got let's give people another few seconds. All right, we've got almost everybody voting this time. So here's the results. Now I want you to think, how do you think your colleagues will do? Do you think, like raise your hand if you think on average most people know how to re-energize themselves. Just give me a little hand raise if you think, yeah, I think they do. You're not far off on that. We have 39%, actually almost 50% are very much or extremely like, yeah, I know what I need to do for myself to re-energize. Some people might need to go hang out with these people a little bit, like figure out what it's going to mean for you to re-energize. And probably these are related. I have a routine for self-care. If you don't already have a routine, this is certainly a suggestion I would have for you in this category, because if you don't make it easy, make it just part of your life, these daily rituals, and that tends to be the first thing to go when other people need you, whether that's at work or at home or the crisis that we all face all the time for all kinds of reasons. Sleep is, the more I've been teaching about sleep, the more important I think it is. And it looks like there might be a little bit of work to be done here. Now, certainly people have rotating shifts sometimes, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The research is really clear about what's happening with sleep. So I just thought it might help you again to know what happens. There's been some pretty cool research that says, we spend a third of our life at sleep. Like, think about that. It must be a really important function. A third of our entire lives are spent asleep. Why would this be? Why is it so important? Well, scholars are finding that it seems that when you go to sleep, some things happen and your spinal fluid actually washes through your brain, and it is clearing out all the sort of debris that gets in there every day. You probably heard of things like oxidation, oxidative stress, and in our cells. So it actually cleans out the brain. And I was just reading last night a study where they kept people awake for just one day. Didn't let them sleep for one day, and compared them to people who had normal sleep, just to see, is this true? Do you make up the sleep? Does the brain really have all these extra particles? And the answer is you don't make up that sleep, and the brain was not able to clear all those particles. And those things have been associated with things like dementia later in life. You've heard of some of the beta amyloids for Alzheimer's and dementia. Sleep is so important. It cognitively changes how we're able to interact even the very next day when we don't have enough sleep. We go through cycles in sleep. There's 4 sleep cycles, and it's really important that we get to the 4th one. It usually takes about 90 minutes to get through a whole cycle for sleep. As I've gotten older, I find that sometimes I wake up at 3:30 in the morning, which I'm not always real happy about. So I've had to learn, okay, what am I doing to get that changed? Oh, I got enough time for another sleep cycle, so I'm going to try that. So being aware that that's how it works is really important. So if you wake up a little early and you only have 30 minutes to go, maybe you can get up because you're not going to make it through that whole sleep cycle. But if you've got that 90 minutes, it's worth trying to tackle that. I'm just going to pop through my questions. So let's talk about some routines when we talk about self-care. There's a lot of evidence that meditation, even short meditations as short as 60 seconds daily, and prayer work. Prayer also seems to maybe work, especially if you're doing it with other people, because it's got that social aspect. It has a sense of purpose and meaning. It kind of just calms us down. It just gets us off this sort of stress feeling that things like these devices also, maybe you can't see it, my phone, my background. These keep us sort of constantly alert. We're not meant to be in that state. The other reason sleep really matters is when we don't get enough sleep, we make another, which I misspelled it as G-H-R-E-L-I-N, ghrelin. That's another neurotransmitter, and when we have more of that, we want to eat. That's the relationship between when you don't get enough sleep and you tend to eat more. Well, it's because that neurotransmitter is saying, well, you're not full yet. Of course, you need to be realistic about what's possible. And I want to share with you some thoughts in terms of shift work and sleep. If possible, a clockwise rotational schedule is really helpful to go from, day, evening, nights. When I grew up as a teenager, my mother was on rotating shift work, so I know how hard that can be. And you really want to think about how 7 to 8 hours of sleep is a baseline that you want to achieve, even for adults. Now, certainly there's some variability in that. Some people could get by with 6 hours. Maybe that's their natural time, but for most adults, it's 7 to 8, and it might be 9 for some people. you want to make sure you protect your sleep times. What does that mean? It means the door's shut, that you have blackout curtains, that your phones are off, there's no alarms, that people know not to disturb you during that time. And regular exercise also seems to be really important, especially when you're changing shifts. Structured naps have also been found to really improve alertness, and they talk about them as preventative, so pre-shift, or sometimes occupational, like during the shift. So there's typically short naps. Pilots do this, for example, if they're on long-haul flights, just to kind of help keep alertness. Caffeine can be helpful, but only at certain times. So if you're working shifts, you might just want to make a note about this. So between 12:20 and 1:20 in the morning, it reduces sleepiness on the night shift, but you don't want to have it in the second half of the shift, because then it's going to make it difficult for you to fall asleep later. So you want to have that in the middle or early in the shift. And then if needed, some people find bright light therapy can make a big difference, because again, it's just getting those circadian rhythms, because the sun is what makes us know when to go to sleep. They actually just did a pretty interesting study where they stuck 40 people in a cave in Spain. So there was no light and they had no clocks, and they just wanted to see, well, when are they going to wake up and go to sleep? So it ends up that they find that the sun is what's really signaling us with the production of melatonin about when to go to sleep. And so sometimes medication like melatonin can be helpful for people too. So you'd want to work with a doctor about that. But there are some other things if you're really struggling on the sleep. So there's a handout here, and again, it's at the end of my slide. You just might find it helpful if you find yourself in this situation or know people in this situation, to think about getting good sleep hygiene as part of a self-care routine, even if you're working rotating shifts. So I want you just to jot down one idea that you might be able to do. Of course, I'm a big sleep advocate because I find people don't get nearly enough, or around meditation or prayer in terms of self-care. What's one thing that you might be able to do a little differently in the next week? And then I want you just to look at those two ideas, so nutrition or sleep, and maybe if you're willing just to share one of those, like which one are you more likely to do? If you wouldn't mind just popping it in the chat, like what's one thing that you might do to enhance your wellness, either under nutrition or self-care? You can unmute or just pop it in the chat. Here are a couple of examples. And koala bears, by the way, sleep an enormous amount of time. I was in Australia for a couple months, and I got to meet koala bears, which I thought were really cute, but ends up they're very smelly. And they sleep like 22 hours a day. Like they wake up to eat and then occasionally engage in some reproductive activity, and that's it. Putting your phone down earlier each night, that's a great idea. Everything off by 10. Nutrition, sleep isn't an option. Meditate, take walks and exercise. Actually look at nature to relax. There's some things that they call it forest bathing. Just being outside does make us feel better, enhances our mood. Drinking more water is a good idea. Maybe you're like my mother, you think water is poison. Bringing fruit to work as a snack instead. When I first started working at Campbell, it was just, it was a different place, and I had to figure out my routine, and I was eating too much Chick-fil-A. So I had to resolve, I'm just going to bring in my lunch. I'm going to do better grocery shopping to bring my lunch in. I could still have lunch with people. We could sit outside, but I don't need to be going to Chick-fil-A all the time. Meal prep at the beginning of the week. These are some great ideas. And I love that one, eating away from your desk or office. Yes, getting a break, again, having that routine. I have on my phone, I think more people know this, I find many of my students don't, you can actually put for it not to interrupt you at night unless it's from certain people. So you can actually put that on your phone. So mine doesn't, after 10, it just does not beep or sing or call or what are all the things that it can do. That's great. Yeah, you can get in a scroll hole like that. They're very tempting. I'm sure they've hired psychologists with the phone companies. They know what makes it very attractive, and its intermittent reinforcement is the strongest there is. So we want to look. We're primed for the ding. Like, what is it? Oh, what happened? We're like a squirrel. And so humans just weren't made to have that much distracted attention, but they're great. It's really reinforcing. And so figuring out how to manage that. I agree, maybe there's not so much thing as too much Chick-fil-A, but then I weighed myself, and let me tell you, there is such a thing as too much Chick-fil-A. All right. Let me move this chat back over here. So, mental health. The biggest message here is learning to take a walk, taking a break. We know that exercise makes, and I don't mean going to the gym, it can just be taking a walk with friends. Our mood increases 5 minutes after some moderate exercise, just enough to get your heart up a little bit for about 15 to 20 minutes. When I was at the University of Arizona, there was one of my colleagues, she actually studied like the role of therapy compared to other things. And unless you have severe depression or some other mental illness, some exercise is just as effective as therapy over a 6-week period. So just getting out, getting some exercise really elevates our mood and makes us feel better. Prayer and meditation, again, are associated with mental wellness because the idea is it just stops us from ruminating and going over and over our thoughts. It just lets our breathing calm down. The breathing part is what's so essential. It just lets our body relax and get off this hypervigilance alert. That depending, I think part of that's why the anxiety levels look like they've been increasing during the pandemic, because we had to be more vigilant about either being annoyed about wearing a mask or looking at other people wearing a mask. There's just a lot of vigilance that we're not used to having to do, and that's exhausting. So learning to have some time through prayer and meditation just takes us out of that space. And again, talk with friends. So this idea of that social aspect is incredibly important for mental health. When we think about a routine, you might need some downtime to decompress over work. I know some people use like driving home as a time to do that. If you've been working from home, you've missed that part. And so you might need to add another part, a ritual, if you've been working from home. Box breathing is another technique that's been shown to be incredibly effective. So if you're feeling anxious about something, it literally can take you 60 seconds. I often teach this strategy to my students. Box breathing is like you're breathing like a box. So you breathe in for 6 counts, you could do 4, you could do 8, you hold it for that same amount, then you breathe out for the same amount, you hold it with no breath for the same amount, and then back again. So normally you could do about 6 of these in 60 seconds. Let's see, so yeah, 1 every 10 seconds. And that will just calm down your physiology and just make you feel a lot better about whatever the task is in front of you. Maybe we'll try some box breathing here at the end. Overcoming burnout. Well, the ideas here are learn to unplug from electronics. They just sort of attach us. Sometimes, even my phone rings and, my husband's looking at it like nervously, like, why am I not answering? And I'm like, I refuse to be controlled by it. It can be hard. Get moving again. So like being active, because we can, especially if you have a desk job, you can be in that situation sitting a lot more than you should. So learning to kind of stand up. In fact, I'm talking from a little small stand-up desk that I have that's portable. I can carry it around with me. If you're out in the field, that you're maybe already moving, so it might be just kind of taking a little bit of a break. There's some research that also says changing how you think about work, especially if you're feeling burnout at work. It's easy for us to often focus on what someone's not doing or the annoyances, but we have a choice on what we focus on. And learning to focus on, okay, yeah, I know that, Joe is always going to do X, Y, or Z, but instead focusing on what's good, what do you like about work, and you diverting your attention to that can help us just reframe how we think about our work. Again, this idea of mindfulness and slowing down. I can be a fast talker. I'm probably making some of you a little crazy talking so fast. But if I slow down and then we take some deep breaths, you can also do that when you're talking with others. If they're upset, you just slow down. It's going to slow them down. Burnout is often because we spent too much time doing one thing and haven't taken a break. So again, this idea of social support at work or with family and friends, again, that's been harder in the past year because of just all the COVID restrictions. But if that wasn't something you were able to maintain, now might be a good time to think about where can I build some other areas of social support. And this is surprising to some people, but actually helping other people makes us feel better. Whether that's volunteering through your church or in your community, I know during COVID, I live on a street. We have a number of widows, and we all just checked in with them. You know, I did some shopping from them, and you just feel better helping somebody else. So thinking a little bit about how could you help others, whether that's at work or in your community, really can help us think about burnout and overcome that. So I'd like you just to write down for yourself when you think about mental health and overcoming burnout, you know, what's one thing that you could do in each of those categories that might increase your mental health and reduce burnout either for yourself or maybe others you work with? What's one thing? We know from psychology it takes about 6 weeks to develop a habit. So if you can do something for 6 weeks, then it becomes just something that you do, whether that's walking, eating a little bit differently. And so when we think about these 4 boxes, nutrition, self-care, mental health, and overcoming burnout, I'd like you just to think about the things you wrote down and like what's at least one of them that you could for sure commit to do in the next week and to start making that part of your routine. So just want you to jot that down. And then if you're comfortable, share that idea in the chat, or you can just unmute. So what's one thing? Oh, I love that, Danielle. Box breathing. Box breathing is amazing. Like people are like, why don't they teach that in like, you know, kindergarten? They should.
I know I used to meditate more like regularly in college, and it helped out a lot. A lot of stresses that college brought on me, and I really have always thought about returning back to it. And then, of course, quote unquote, too busy, and I need to make that time when there really is time. It's just I need to make that time for myself.
Well, Andy, that's a great observation, and thank you for sharing that. I think the thing we fail to do is make an appointment for ourselves. And so being comfortable just to like put in an appointment, even if it's like 5 minutes for meditation, it's something you could do at lunch. I know when I have to have a lot of meetings, I try to make like a couple minutes of just meditation or going outside time. It's okay to schedule it with yourself. Yeah, take more walks. Some people, there's something called the Pomodoro method. It says, and you can actually Google this and find it on online. I'm going to type it in here so you can see Pomodoro. You change up every 20 minutes. So if you know you're working on something, then it'll if you just do the things online, it'll like sing you a little timer every 20 minutes. So you could just stop for a second, look around, stand up, take a break, and then start back. Yeah, find a form of exercise that you enjoy. Lately, my grandson, I wish he would pick less expensive ones, but he's picking up golf, which I'm excited about. But I'm like, golf is expensive, but golf's good. So finding some exercise that you really like. What's a couple other ideas people might try? Jason from San Francisco. I'm checking out your view there, Jason. Yeah, the easiest and first thing that gets dropped is self-help. I mean, there's a paradox about wellness. It's that we think we're too busy for it, but actually if we make a little bit of time, even 5 or 10 minutes, other things are easier and it doesn't seem as hectic and busy. And I certainly, I have some folks who, the last year's been tough. They've got kids, the kids have been homeschooled, they're trying to work. It can be difficult to find a time when it doesn't seem hectic. But working with a partner, or if you're raising kids on your own, like just having somebody come over for just a little bit of time just to give you that space. Let's hear a couple more ideas. What's one thing that you might do? Yeah, laughing with friends is good. Thank you, Leslie. I'm coming over to your beach place later, and we'll have some laughs. Yeah, and you can try just video. I mean, you can try meditation and see what works. Like try it for a week for 1 minute a day and just see if it helps. You know, video games actually is interesting. So there's some research that says it helps, especially if you're doing it with somebody else because it's that social activity. But if it's sort of mindless and you're doing it on your own, it may not be as effective. Reading, so just having some separate time to relax and re-energize. Gratitude journal. You know, the research on gratitude says you want to maybe just do it a couple times a week. It seems to be more effective than every day because as humans, we tend to get used to stuff that we do every day and we tend to take it for granted. So some of the research says maybe like 3 times a week is what works best, although it might be working well for you every day. And actually, we're going to talk, I have a session on gratitude later in the year. My message here is making a routine that prioritizes your wellness will help make it a priority for others and help you have a more balanced life, enjoy it, be better, be healthier than if we just sort of push that to the side and think it's something we're going to get to later. As I mentioned, I'm teaching a class on the psychology of happiness. So the road to happiness, I'm going to sum up this 8-week course I'm teaching with 3 things. We know these 3 things make the biggest difference for people's happiness and well-being. And that's having some social support. So a few friends that you feel you can share what's going on, talk about life, your aspirations, just hang out. Having some time for exercise, and it might be the kind that's at the gym, but it just might be getting outside, parking your car further from work, park it far in the parking lot if you go to Walmart or the grocery store, and moving more, taking the stairs. So just moving our bodies around, because especially if you have desk jobs, we tend to sit a lot, and it ends up we need to be moving around for a better health. In fact, they found that cultures that do squatting for sitting, they live longer than more Western societies where we sit in chairs. So that hip exercise and moving around seems really important. And the third, which I didn't focus on as much in this presentation today, but it's having a life with meaning. And so that there's something meaningful to you, whether that's in your work or your family, that matters, like that you're getting up every day. Yeah, and I thank you for that, Melissa. Getting over the shame of admitting you're having a hard time. I mean, because it can, you don't want to look like, oh, I'm weak or I'm not coping, but it's okay. I mean, there's lots of people that are having a hard time, and being able to say, hey, I'm struggling here, and being able to talk about what are some strategies for me to get to a different place. That's really what's important. And hopefully you'll all do this for your colleagues. So being able to think about how could you create more of a climate to focus on wellness and prioritizing that, whether that's encouraging each other, maybe having groups where you're going to eat better at work, or focus on taking some walks. So thinking about how you can support others to engage in these behaviors is really important. And the idea of a routine. So that routine and being able to say, hey, it's been a very tough year. What kind of strategies can we sort of re-put in place as things are opening up and feeling a little bit better? Here's some of the resources that I have for you, and Antonia, I don't know if you're sending this out, but if not, maybe we can grab this slide for sure and share it with everyone. There's some great information here about nutrition and sleep and burnout. And if you're interested in wellness, this is a really terrific wellness scale you can take, and it'll score it for you and kind of just make some suggestions about other routines. So for some people, some things work better than others. And I'm just going to pause and see what questions you have about wellness, or comments, thoughts you have about implementing it, focusing more on that in your sphere of the world at work and with your personal community.
I just tend to know that, like, when I started meditating in college, like I mentioned earlier, like one of those things is that consistency is tough. You said like it takes 6 weeks for it to actually become routine. But one of the things for me is just like always forgiving failure, like recognizing it's good because you didn't keep up a consistent routine, but beating yourself up over it, saying you can't do it, is where it starts turning negative. So I always made sure to recognize it and say, hey, let's be better tomorrow, and just start again, and just kind of have faith in that process. And if it fails a bunch of times, then maybe that's something that you need to change. Maybe it's the timing, maybe it's a different practice. But that was one thing that worked for me, was always kind of forgiving failure when creating those new routines, so you don't burn out or make it worse, or develop even worse habits.
I love that you shared that, Andy. We can tend to be hard on ourselves, like, gosh, I can't even do this. But that actually idea of mindfulness is like, all right, well, today's over. We'll just start again tomorrow. So having that intention and figuring out, maybe it is the timing. Maybe, in fact, like, look at this, like the time of these sessions has made a big difference in attendance. So sometimes just tweaking things can make a really big difference. And so extending grace to yourself about your efforts is really important.
I just want to piggyback off Andy, like he said, keeping that routine and being self-aware of what mental state or anything you're at. I know last week I was traveling, and when I was in the hotel room around 5, 6, I was starting to get a little anxiety just because I was like, well, like, I don't know, I didn't know where it was coming from. But then I realized it was because I wasn't putting my routine wasn't the same where I can go out and go for a run. So took a little break, got out of the hotel room, ran, jogged a little bit, came back, and just felt good sweating and getting back to that mental state where I was at. And so I felt the anxiety when COVID happened, and I've never felt anxiety before. And then when COVID happened, I was locked down. I wasn't getting that interaction with people or going outside or doing things. And then little by little started happening, and started going out and started balancing and getting back to normal. So I was kind of happy that I was self-aware and realized what was the point of where my anxiety was coming from and what I needed to do to make sure I was pushing that or dealing with it and actually facing it and handling it the way I can handle it.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Antonio. And I mean, the two things I'd really like to highlight about what you said is having that self-awareness, and we're feeling that anxiety or like it's pushing us over, is just to pause for a second and kind of go, where is this coming from? And, oh, it's the routine, or, oh, COVID. Campbell taught face-to-face this past year. And, those first couple of weeks of school, I mean, we had a lot of students with a lot of anxiety. It was just and there's a whole routine. I mean, Dr. Fuqua knows what I'm talking about. It's like, I'm going to the bathroom, I'm like, oh, I don't have my mask on, I got to go back and get it. And then, oh, we got to clean the classroom. And, oh, this person needs to put their mask, it's just the whole thing. And that level of vigilance is exhausting. Plus, I mean, the thing about COVID is it made us have to do things that are completely opposite of what human nature is about. We are social animals. We want to see people's faces. I got pretty good at actually being able to recognize my students, just from the eyes up, but that takes work to be able to do that. We're used to seeing the whole face, and we want to hug. And I mean, as a teacher, I'm all the time like bumping into students and harassing them, and I couldn't do any of that. I'm having to stand up here at this podium behind plexiglass, which is completely opposite. When I ran this by some of the managers last week, we also talked about oxytocin. It's our cuddle hormone, the love hormone. When we touch people, it gets released. It reduces our stress. It makes us feel better. And so that was just a lot more limited. So hopefully if people sort of recognize that. And so some people are feeling anxiety because they were like, whoa, this whole mask thing has changed too fast. I'm not quite sure. Other people are like ripping it off and going, hallelujah. So people have different reactions about it, and sort of recognizing where that might create anxiety for you, and extending some grace, like Andy talked about, is really good too. We have time for 2 more comments or observations or questions.
One thing I've done as far as my mental health is I started listening to podcasts that talked about mental health and the importance of it. And that motivated me to actually get a life coach recently. And so that's been really helpful to talk with her just about life, and talk about dealing with COVID, and just dealing with just working on personal and career goals. And then also I started a garden so I can disengage from my electronics and get outside and be with nature. And it gives me a sense of fulfillment to watch something grow.
Well, that's why you have all those beautiful flowers behind you. Do you have any podcasts you recommend in particular?
Let's see. One is called The Friend Zone. They talk about mental health every week, and they talk about they give like a tip, and they The Friend Zone. That would be one that talks about mental health a lot.
Oh, great. Yeah, and there's some terrific TED Talks too. So, that's sort of another, intellectual refreshment, but there's some really great TED Talks you can always just sort of look at that are inspirational and can kind of help you feel good about people overcoming different things or resilience and so forth. So I recommend those as well. Yes, thank you, Melissa. When things that usually come easily start to be hard, it's easy to kind of knock yourself down. Absolutely true. It's sort of black and white thinking instead of going, maybe today's not my great day, so let me just, be a little patient with myself, and I don't have to be at my best every single day. I know, I love that people are willing to share too, so thank you so much for that. I have a garden at my house too, and it's a huge stress reliever for me. I mean, it's just incredibly rewarding because you can tell that you pulled up the weeds. There's a lot of things you do. You're like, I don't know if this mattered or not, but man, I got those weeds up around those tomato plants. So, and I could see it, and it's an enormous sense of pleasure. So just having some things like that, from figuring out for yourself what's really rewarding is important. What questions do you have about wellness? Oh, there was one other book I was going to share. And I think about it as healthiness habits. I'll find the book. I don't have it right here. There's a really great book, and if you're interested in this topic, it kind of takes you through a survey to ask you what is best for you, like what area would appeal best for you, and then it gives you different interventions related to like gratitude or changing some habits and how you think about things. Sonia Luber-Moros, I can't even say her last name, Luber-Marsky. I'll get the title of it though and send it to you, Antonio, so you can share it with folks.
Dr. Lunsford, do you have any comments on the relationship between wellness and job performance?
Yes, there seems to be a strong relationship between people feeling, especially wellness and satisfaction at work, and so we call it like life satisfaction or social well-being, and productivity at work, intention to stay, a flourishing climate that's really positive that makes people want to stay at work. So there's a pretty strong commitment to that. And you've probably seen some of this work on organizational engagement. So the extent to which then people are motivated and want to engage, because if you like the people you're working with and you feel good, then you want to help achieve that mission. And it's a little depressing if you look at some of the engagement data. You can imagine a boat with 10 people in it. And if we look at engagement in a lot of places, 3 or 4 people are rowing that boat. And about 3 people are kind of sunbathing. They're kind of, oh, look out for the crab pot over there, or whatever, but they're not rowing. And then you got another 3 people like drilling holes actively in the bottom of the boat. And so we can think about that in terms of engagement at work. And we want to not have people drilling holes in our boat. We want to get them at least sunbathing and looking out for the obstacles, if not rowing. But the more people feel, have good mental health, feel engaged, connected with folks at work, makes them much more inclined to want to move that work forward in a meaningful and active way. And the thing is, if they do that, they're actually going to feel better too. So it is a cycle. So the more you're engaged and you love doing what you do and being with people that you work with, the better you're going to perform. And then that kind of just feeds on itself. Great question. When I first saw that image of the boat in a research study, I just can't get it out of my mind, because I'm always like, where are the 3 people drilling? Like, I need to help get rid of their drill. And often you can just sort of have honest conversations with people, like, what would it take? What would it take for you to love being here, to help you feel better? Because mostly humans just don't like to feel isolated. And when we feel isolated, we tend to be hard on ourselves and on others. And so having that sense of social connection and belongingness is really important. So another thought is, you can invite somebody maybe who you don't normally hang out with to, go to lunch with you or do something, take a walk at lunch, engage on a project with you. Like, it's a good time to kind of bring people along too. So that's a really important important skill and message about wellness. But the big one is get a routine. Have a routine for at least one thing. So I hope you'll all think about just committing to one thing in the next week, because if you start doing that, it starts on that pathway. And some people, it looks like, are doing a really great job, although there's always some room for improvement. And others, maybe it could make a really big difference for you and how you feel. Any other questions or thoughts, comments? Yeah, I like that, Melissa. Yeah, making your bed. You know, and I'm the kind of, we do make our bed in my house. You know, people are different about that, but it is like, yeah, that looks good. I made my bed. My husband will look at me like, you didn't pull up your side. So recognizing those small accomplishments for yourself and for others is really important.
Any more questions or anything?
Well, I appreciate you all being here today. It's something, obviously, that I think is a really important topic, and I thank you for spending your time on it, and for the company for picking that as a topic. I think it's so important to spend a little time thinking about how to take care of yourself, and that makes you better able to take care of others at work and at home. So kudos to all of you, and I'm going to go hang out in Chanel's garden and Leslie's beach house. So I'll hang out if there's any other questions, but have a really great day and think about enhancing your wellness at work and at home.